Well, that's just about 10 o'clock now when we were due to start. I see there are people still coming on. DG Alistair's in charge of letting them in. So thank you very much for that, Alistair, and for setting up the meeting today. Can I just welcome everybody? We're recording the event because some people aren't able to attend either today or on Wednesday evening. So we're recording, and then we'll give those people the opportunity to look at the recording and maybe have a short session with them, or you can look at the recording as well. I'll maybe ask Alistair to mute us all, and then I'll unmute myself, because I don't know about you, but I'm getting feedback.
Okay, that's done.
Thanks very much, Alistair. So, welcome. Just one or two things other than what I said already. It's very helpful if you've got a question, either to put it in the chat box or to use the reactions to raise your hand on screen. And we can see that if you just simply put your hand up physically, because there's now 33 people on the call, we can't necessarily see people. So if you wouldn't mind having questions that way, we'll certainly take all the questions. We'll send out, after this event, we'll send out the link to the recording, and also any handouts or links to various bits and pieces that either I or Alistair will mention today. And don't hesitate to be in touch with us, or to be in touch with people who are the specialists in a particular area. We're not going into great depth today. If there's a need for that, for example, I'm going to talk a bit about Rotary Club Central later on. If there's a need, we'll set up another meeting, because not everybody is involved with particular areas of the Secretary's job. So I'd like to kick off, first of all, by talking a little bit about the role of the Secretary, which will vary from club to club. Different clubs do things in different ways. So the way in which you do it is absolutely perfectly fine, and it may be that there's slight differences in the duties that people have. So what I'm going to talk about now, I'll send out a copy of in the next day or so you don't necessarily need to write it down. But I'm absolutely certain, the first thing I'm going to say is, if you haven't done so already, will you please register on My Rotary? I'm sure all of us who are on today have done that. But if you haven't, please register on My Rotary, because it's the gateway to so many things. And it's helpful too if you encourage members to register on My Rotary, so that they get into the parts of both the Rotary in Britain and Ireland website and the Rotary International website that are not public facing, and there's quite a lot of interesting things there. My feeling in being a secretary, and I should say I'm a club secretary as well, is that there are, at the present moment, probably 4 main handbooks, if you like, or publications that are essential. I'm not talking now about the compliance here. Well, some of it is compliance, but I'm talking about it in general terms. The thing that I think is most important is the Constitution. And of course, I'll then say, if you have any problems sleeping, if you try and read it, you'll soon go off to sleep. But the thing about the Constitution is that, and some of you will have heard me say this before, that 99% of the time it doesn't just actually matter, but 1% it does, and we can't always know which is the 1% that's going to be important. So let me say just a little bit about the Constitution. I'm not going to read parts of it, so don't worry. But first of all, when I speak about the Constitution, and when you speak about the Constitution, you're talking about the Rotary in Britain and Ireland Constitution. The Rotary International Constitution is not completely similar to the Rotary in Britain and Ireland one. The main difference is that in Britain and Ireland, the bylaws for the clubs are in general terms set. So when you've got the club constitution, you've got articles, and then you've got bylaws. For those parts of the world that use the Rotary International Constitution, and essentially that's everybody apart from Britain and Ireland, their bylaws are not set. So if you were to go on to the training for secretaries in the Learning Centre on Rotary International, you would find that quite a lot of is made about setting bylaws. It's my own personal view, but I think it's helpful that we've got the bylaws set for us. Now, you can actually change the bylaws, and but only to a certain extent. And most of the times you probably wouldn't want to change it. But there are two articles that allow us to change things quite significantly. And if you're interested in which ones they are, they're Article 7 and Article 9 of the Rotary in Britain and Ireland Constitution. They came into being after the Council on Legislation in 2016. I don't know if you remember, but this was the time, just before 2016, Council on Legislation, there were a number of pilots on membership on the go. Some of you may remember them, although it's 5 years ago now, but what some clubs were piloting was associate members, corporate members. We were looking at flexible and innovative clubs, and these articles essentially allow us to be in membership and meetings as flexible as we want to. And I think most of us know that now, but just in case you're new to the job and weren't aware, there's a huge amount of flexibility there on meeting frequency. I'll mention some of this, although technically it's maybe with your membership chair, but just so as most of us know that. With meeting frequency, what Rotary International would say now is that clubs must meet twice a month, but the way in which clubs meet is really open to whatever is suitable, so that some clubs might have a formal meeting once a month, and some and then for another meeting might have a service project, so that if you were preparing, for example, for an event, let's just say you're going to hold a run for people, 10K run, then the second meeting could be that sort of meeting which is planning and not formal. You might be doing it on the grounds that you're going to use. So there's a huge amount of flexibility in club meetings. And there's a huge amount of flexibility in attendance levels as well. There's still pages about attendance and how you can claim an attendance, still pages of it in the Constitution. But essentially, what we are able to do now is to set attendance levels. And the level that is the default, if you like, which takes a little bit of time to find, but I'll point you towards it, is a level which says that members should attend 50% of meetings in any half year, or give 12 hours service in any half year, or give a mix of both. That's the default. That's what sits there in the Constitution, unless you change it. And it may seem a strange thing to change, but you could actually set a level of attendance that is nothing, that is is no attendance level. People aren't required to attend. It might be a strange thing to do, but you can actually do that. Or you can have a higher level of attendance. The point I really want to make is that it's your club and you can decide. And the final bit of this flexibility is that we are now allowed to choose the types of membership we have. This is a bit of a strange one because essentially Rotary International only recognise two types of membership, and those are active and honorary. But you could have another type of sorry, my phone ran there. Another type of attendance, sorry, another type of membership, which might be to do with family membership, for example. Now, what we have is a situation where Rotary International will charge anybody who's an active member exactly the same fee. And at the present moment, the district charges everybody exactly the same fee, but at club level, you could amend the type of fee that you have. If, again, just quickly on membership and the types of members, as I said, Rotary International recognise active and honorary, so that essentially if you have any other type of membership, that person should be fundamentally an active member of the club. But again, if you want to have associate, and that is recognised in the data management system, that's entirely up to you. So that's just a little bit about the Constitution. And most things where there are issues you will find in the Constitution. It's not the easiest thing to read. It's sometimes quite taxing mentally, but most of the things that you will want are there. And for a lot of the time, you won't use it at all. So that's the first of four things that I'll mention that I think are essential, if not to read it in great depth, but to know it's there. Second thing I would mention is a document that's called Be a Vibrant Club. Some of you will be familiar with it. Some of you may not have seen it. This is a document produced again by Rotary International, and it talks about how you could move to different ways of operating. It's a sort of summary of the club health check, if you like, that tells you different ways of operating that might make a club more vibrant and interesting. I'll not go into any great detail, but I think it's something that maybe is on your virtual bookshelf, that's maybe on your desktop on the PC or laptop. And it's, to be honest, it's worth a read. The third thing that I think is worth looking at, and I think it's a very good document, but it's long, and that is the disputes procedure. Now, I think we've had, I know that we've had in the past lots of information again in the Constitution, but what Peter King, a past RIBI president, and he's also a tribunal judge, what he has done is produced a document that shows how to deal with disputes. And that might range from a disagreement amongst club members to a disagreement with an outside organisation. And although, as I say, it's quite a long document, it's worth having a look at, making yourself familiar with, because again, it's the sort of thing that you might occasionally need to use. Some of it is fairly simple. For example, if two members or more than two members are having a dispute, the first step would be to ask them to talk it out amongst themselves and see if they could resolve it. So it's fairly straightforward. But then it moves through various areas, including mediation and then ultimately arbitration, when it gets to mediation and arbitration, the mediators and arbitrators are people who are not within the club. But the bottom line for this is that with a dispute or a situation in a club, it's really, in the first instance, for the club to try and resolve what is happening. So again, worth a read. And the final document, and this might be between yourself and the treasurer, and that is the insurance guide. If it's something that you haven't read, then just have a quick look at it at some point. It's a well-written document, it's easy to read, it's quite straightforward, and it will tell you where you're automatically insured and where you're where you might require to take out extra insurance. In general terms, it's extra insurance. It's to do with perhaps the type of event you're having and what's going on. Pardon me, or it may be extra insurance for things that are owned by the club. But again, as I say, those are the 4 documents that I think are worth looking at. And Gordon in Aberdeen is saying, does a club need to have its own constitution? And the answer to that is yes, but you just simply, Gordon, copy the Rotary in Britain and Ireland constitution. It's so simple. It has blanks in it where you put in the name of your club and so on. So you would put in Balgownie in there and so on. So it's dead straightforward, and it's unhelpful because if you try and get it off the Rotary in Britain and Ireland website, you'll get a PDF. But if you drop me a line and want a copy, you'll get a Word document that you can change very quickly. Some of you will have the facility to change PDF into a Word document, but some of you won't, so I'm happy to help with that. And you will very rarely, I think, need the constitution in that way. There'll be lots of clubs that never add their own names to the constitution. But interestingly, I now in my own club seem to be someone who chases all sorts of grants and has been successful in some of them for projects. Most likely, if you're trying to get something like that, they will ask you for your constitution. So it's there, just send it to them. There may be other instances where you need the copy of the constitution. But as I say, I'm happy to send anybody the constitution in Word. So those are the 4 main documents. So I'll move on to other areas now. The first thing I think I would probably say is to understand and use the data management system, DMS. I'm sure there's nobody here who will tell on me, but it is a little bit clunky. But it's also quite, Philip's nodding his head, he's a DMS expert, but it's clunky, but it's blooming useful at times, because it takes me, when I'm writing to you all, at the present moment, there's 86 secretaries registered, because a couple of clubs haven't had secretaries in recent times. But if I'm writing out to secretaries, it takes me seconds to tick the box for all secretaries, and it's great that way. But it does take a little bit of time to get used to it. We're going to talk about it more in due course, but it is useful, and it's useful within the club. And arguably, it's the safest way of sending things out, because some people, I haven't got sufficient expertise, but some people would say if you simply use an email system, that it is open to abuse or not being accurate enough. So DMS, set aside, I'm sure most of you are experts, but if you're not, set aside a day like today where it's a bit dull and have a look at it. We'll talk more in a moment. The other thing that I'm going to sell a little bit to you is Rotary Club Central, and I'll speak a little bit more about it in due course. But Rotary Club Central, I mean, I've heard people say that they think that it's a way of Big Brother spying on us. I honestly don't think it's that, but it is a useful way of knowing what projects you've done in a year or what you plan to do. And if you're interested in getting a Rotary citation, and I'll nail my colours to the mast and say I'm interested in things like citations, but I'm not interested in other types of competition. From a personal point of view, I'm interested in citations because we're all on an equal playing field. We can all get one. Every single club in the district, every single club in the world can get one, and it's the only way that you can get it. But that's, you know, some of the things. Some people will say, "Oh, it's people spying," but it also is a way in which, for example, assistant governors just now are going around doing attending assemblies. And some of you probably had to, or your president, incoming president, had to write something about how they would, what they're going to do in the coming year. Just put it in Rotary Club Central. The other thing that will astound you is that if you keep a reasonably accurate check on the amount of hours that people are giving in service, it's a huge amount of hours. I think some of you have commented on this before, that people are actually giving a huge amount of service. So it keeps a record, but I'll talk a little bit more about that just in a moment. And then again, if you're not familiar with them, then become familiar with the compliance aspects of things, such as data protection. I don't think that there isn't much at the present moment to say about data protection, in that there haven't been any changes recently. So we're not doing a big session on that. The stuff on the Rotary in Britain and Ireland website is quite good. So you can see everything there. But I would make a couple of comments about data protection just at the moment, and that is, collect only the data that you need. So here's an example. If you're holding a raffle and you're going to advise the winners by phone of whether or not they've won a raffle, then you don't need to collect their addresses. That's not part of what you're doing, and there's no necessity for it. And data protection is always about the necessity for collecting information. So don't collect what you don't need. And this was one highlighted by Peter King that I mentioned. I mentioned Peter a moment ago. And I have to say, I personally wasn't aware of this until it was highlighted by him a few months ago. And that is, don't use data collected for one purpose for another purpose, because that could be challenged. I mean, the collection of it could be challenged. So I'll give you an example, because I was reading about it earlier this morning. Some of you will know about the Rotary Ride. So if you're collecting information for the Rotary Ride, don't then use that information to invite those people to a separate, shall we say, let's say, Rotary barbecue. So you don't use it for a different purpose. So that if you want to use that type of information, if you want to use the registration for the Rotary Ride for another purpose, then prepare a form which lets people opt into the other purpose. So you might have what you need to collect about the Rotary Ride, various bits and pieces, and then you could have a box that the person could tick that says, I would like you to send me more information about Rotary, something like that. So Peter was quite keen that this was shared with everybody, because we could be outside the legislation if we use stuff collected for one purpose for another. And then I'm sure we all know this, don't keep records for any longer than is necessary. And again, I don't need to say it, but I'm going to anyway, and keep them securely, in whatever way is secure for you. So that's a little bit about data protection. I'll speak later on a little bit more about health and safety. And we're going to hear something about equity and diversity, and also PVG safeguarding. And I'd like to take a few minutes now just to talk about some of other things in the secretary's role. As I say, it differs between clubs, so this might not be part of your this might not be part of your remit, is what I'm trying to say. So it's generally the secretary's role to be involved in the new member process, particularly in the 7-day letter. It's usually the secretary that sends that out. I'm not going to go into member processes because they vary between club to club, but it's usually our job to do the 7-day letter. And if your club does maintain attendance records, personally, I don't see the need to, but again, it's your club. Then it's the secretary's duty to do that. And it's usually our job to organise the weekly meetings. In the tradition of the club, that might generally be preparing an agenda and also, I don't know, organising the place. It depends really on what your club does. And it's our job to organise council meetings and maintain a record of those and share them with all members. And I'm going to very, very briefly say something about the club council, just to draw it to your attention. Two things really. First of all, technically speaking, the council is the decision-making body of the club. I know it's quite common with most clubs to make a decision at the council and then to discuss it with members. That's fine, but if you want to read the constitution, the council makes the decisions, and if the rest of the club don't like it, they appeal the decision. I'm not suggesting anybody changes their practices. I'm just saying be aware of that. And the second thing about the council, I maybe should have said this first, is that more and more I hear of small clubs not actually having a council. Again, you know, the constitution has a council, says there's a council. It's your club, you do what you want, but be aware, I think is how I would put it, that there will be times where you need to make a decision that cannot involve all the members of the club. This will be relatively rare. The best one I can think of is one where you need to make a decision, your club needs to make a decision about a member in the club. Let us say the decision to be made is that the person might or might not be suspended from the club. Now, there's 4 steps in that sort of thing. I'm not going to go into them because you can read them if you want them. But if you think about it, you cannot or you should not have the whole club making that decision. So if you don't use a council as a council, then recognise that some of your members, and that might just be the officers, it might just be the officers, at some point might have to make a decision. So I'm not saying you need to particularly do anything other than recognise that there will be times, or there may be times when that happens. And another part of the day-to-day work of the secretary is calling AGMs, annual general meeting, special general meeting, and any extraordinary general meetings as required. So then again, just dealing with that relatively briefly, what are you required to do throughout the year? Well, the thing I'd like from you just now, if you've not sent it to me, is the annual compliance return, which I'd like either signed by yourself or by the incoming president. And that simply says that you are abiding by the compliance structure that is set in place and is on the Rotary in Britain and Ireland website. It's all quite straightforward. The policies are all there. And if we are not abiding by them, then we're not actually behaving in a compliant manner. The only thing on the compliance that I would draw your attention to, if you're going onto the website, is that it talks about vulnerable adults, and the interpretation of vulnerable adults differs for legislation in England and Wales and in Scotland. So there is a difference there, but it's highlighted in some of the extra documents that are there for Scotland. The other thing to ensure as well by the 30th of June that your DMS record is up to date, so that we have the correct number of members, so that we don't risk being invoiced for more members. I think that would concern us than we actually have. And it's taken a few years for Rotary in Britain and Ireland to get this all in place, but they're pretty, to be honest, unsympathetic. If you go back and say, well, actually, we meant to bring it up to date or something like that, just try and get it up to date. We'll talk about DMS in a moment. And then throughout the year, between July and the middle of November, you need to hold the club AGM. Something else that normally I'd ask about September is the district council. So you need to be aware of who's attending the district council and who are the voting members. So you do that both in September and March, and that you would need to ensure at the end of December, 31st of December, again, that the DMS is up to date, because that's the point where Rotary GB&I will call for the second part of the subscription. The district subscription is just paid in one payment from July. And into the next calendar year, you would have a special general meeting between April and 31st of May. And between the 1st of May and the 30th of June, you'd have the club assembly and advise the assistant governor of the date of that. And now, at the present moment, we have moved towards June as the date of the district conference. So that's generally the secretary's role. But as I say, it differs from one club to another. You may be asked to do less, there may be an assistant secretary, or you may be asked to do more. And I'm noting that Philip asked a question a while ago, if we basically adopt the constitution as it is, then do we automatically follow updates as they happen? And the answer to that is yes, Philip. The club constitution will be updated by Rotary GB&I, and it's usually updated because of one of two things, or both these things. First of all, decisions made by the annual business meeting of Rotary GB&I, or changes made either by the council on legislation. So that's the constitution. So we're going to move on to other things now, but are there any particular questions? And here's Philip coming ask. You need, Philip's question is about allowing people to pay monthly, which is a great idea until you actually try and do it, and then you discover the slight drawbacks that there are. Your question, Philip, is if you pay monthly, do you use the if you start paying now, or let's say in July, and your sub is £10 a month because you pay £120 a year, and people start paying £10, but then Rotary in Britain and Ireland will ask you for half of £67. You will need to cover that from your own float, Philip. Or alternatively, get your people, if you've got a new member, get them to make an upfront payment and then start the monthly payments. I'll not go into detail, but there are ways of doing it. Yeah. And John Milne's asking, are there procedures and guidance about the need for club councils to consult membership? The procedure, John, is that the council, there's no procedure to consult the membership. The constitution allows the council to make the decision, and if the club members don't like the decision, then they need to go through a formal process of appealing the decision. It seems to me, I'm telling you what is there, I'm not telling you how to do it, I'm telling you what's there, but it does seem to me that in general terms, you know enough about your membership to consult them and involve them in things. That seems to be sensible, that we don't get into a situation where we're arguing about something. But on the questions that you've asked, I'll point you towards some things in the Constitution for you to look at and decide, not for me to tell you what to do. So I'd probably like to move on now and talk for a short while, and it will be short, on the Rotary Club Central. I've already said that, you know, I actually think it's a good thing, and no one's paying me to say that, and I'm not going to get promotion for saying it, and I'm not going to get anything, but I do think it's good, because what it does is it lets people see what's being done in the club. Again, Rotary Club Central is there's instructions in how to complete it, and the officers of the club who are named, and that would generally speaking be the president-elect, and the secretary and treasurer. And for those clubs that have an executive secretary, then they would be able to actually amend things in Rotary Club Central. Every other member who is registered for Rotary Club Central is able to access and look at what's there. They can't amend it. And for those of you who are less familiar with it, what it contains is the information, you fill it in yourself, on the service projects that you plan, and it's a method of costing them as well, if you like. Any other type of work that you plan, particularly with youth, you know, do you have an Interact club? Because it's Rotary International, it doesn't recognise Rotakids, but you could put that in as one of your other projects. It recognises Rotaract. It recognises people who, if you fill it in, who send youngsters on RILA and so on. And in particular, it recognises our contribution as clubs to public image, whether we use the Rotary branding well or not. But again, it's all, the vast majority of it is filled in by yourselves. What's not filled in, and what is filled in automatically, is the number of people in the club once you register people on DMS and send it over to the RI database. And what it also records, if you put a goal in for foundation giving, it will actually put that into the Rotary Club Central for you. The other thing that it does is that if you share projects and the Rotary International Showcase, what you might find is that you get other clubs who can see that offering to help you. I wouldn't have, I've seen it said about that, but I wouldn't necessarily have thought that that might be the case until in the previous club that I belonged to, I put something into the showcase about a project in Nepal, and within days got an inquiry from a club in England wanting to be part of this. And it shows you how powerful it can be in that this was a project that over the piece, probably through, it was a global grant project. So over the piece, it probably cost about $60,000. And the club that joined in brought over $10,000 of that, plus district, DDF, plus any money from Rotary International. So from my point of view, that was worthwhile. And from your point of view, it might well be worthwhile. What it also lets the governor as well see what is going on in clubs. And, you know, since we've got a governor on, and since I'm a past governor, I think we would like to think that as governors, we're not there to criticize in any way, we're there to assist. So it might be, you know, some of us can see, I as district secretary can see it, some of us can see all the projects that are in clubs. So that, for example, just looking at the people who are in front of me, if something's happening in Aberfeldian district and read about it and say, oh, that's a good idea, I might think, or Alistair as governor, Heather coming in as governor, I might think, wait a minute, I was in Inverurie quite recently and they were talking about something like this. So there is this opportunity to share ideas as well. So what if we, in due course, what we may do is have some time with Rotary Club Central, just demonstrating it for those who want to be involved. And it'd be really good if your club, if you became involved in it. It actually, once you've got it populated, my guess, and speaking with a couple of people who've populated it, whom I'm friendly with, we think it takes, at the beginning of the Rotary year, we would say it takes about an hour of your time to begin to populate it. And then throughout the Rotary year, it probably takes maybe 5 minutes a week, but hardly any time. And it's also, to an extent, ballpark figures, so that, you know, if you have a project and you're recording the hours, let's not make our lives difficult. Let's not have loads of bits of paper, but let's say, well, the head of the project can say, yes, my estimate is that this week we've worked on it for 10 hours or whatever it is. So I'm just happy to answer any questions in due course, and if necessary, to hold a meeting on it. The next part, are there any urgent questions on Rotary Club Central? If not, type them in at some point. I can't see any hands. Type them in at some point and we can deal with it. Now, we're lucky in that we've got a fabulous expert on DMS. And that's Christy Robb, and I can't see her because she must be on my page too, but I know she's on now. And I'm going to hand over to Christy in a moment. So the not so good news is that Christy has many other jobs in Rotary just now. So next year, she's not going to be so involved. She's not going to be involved with DMS, but the really good news is that her successor, and there's absolutely no pressure on him at all, but it's Philip from Currymuir, who's got loads of background in systems, and he's going to take over. So we will continue with expertise. I can do some things in DMS, but Christy might say when she starts speaking that every so often she gets a note that says, please help me, because I can't get this to work. So Christy, can I hand over to you? And thank you for coming on just now and for a session on DMS. Thank you very much, Christy.
Thank you, Kath.
Oh,
Good morning, everyone. As Kath said, I am the DMS officer for the district at the moment. I will be passing over to Philip Ross in due course. I don't like to say that I'm looking forward to it, but it will be good to start letting go of some of my district duties got a lot on this year. So I'm going to just run through a slideshow that for some might be things that you already know. It is just about the basic processes that you take in the DMS, which for some can be a bit complicated because it's not the most straightforward system to use sometimes. It is available as a PDF guide as well, which I'm happy to send to Philip if he wants to cascade it again this year. We've done that last year and it did really help. So it is available. If you want a copy of that afterwards, please just let either myself or Philip know and we'll get that to you. So let me just share my screen just now. Okay. So this is what this slideshow will go through. So it takes you through the membership processes that you'll take on a yearly basis, including adding your club officers in for the current year and the following year, and lastly changing the primary email on the account as well. There is a small section you can find on the DMS, which is all it goes through the RIBI website. So again, also very good to go onto if you have any issues. So firstly, accessing the DMS can be done in a few different ways. If you're logged into your template site, there is a button there that gives you the option for DMS. If you click on that, that will take you straight to the DMS login screen. A good way that I've found is that if you go to Google and type in Rotary DMS, it is the first search result that comes up. It's very, very easy to access if you're ever looking for it. So this is the page that you'll get when you first come onto it. You need to make sure that you do have a My Rotary account to be able to access it. So if you don't have that already, I would advise that you go and set one of them up. It's just the same login, same email and password that you would use to log into that. Membership, adding a new Rotarian to your club that's never ever been in Rotary before, and you have to really check that, make sure that they've not, even years ago, been part of Rotary, because they will still have an RI number assigned. So once you're in the DMS, we're going to the My Area tab on the left hand side. You would then click your membership tab and you'd be presented with that screen below. Now, there are some issues at the moment, as far as I'm aware, they are still there, where when you're typing in a name and a surname, if it is a current member that's maybe been a different club or a previous member, it sometimes doesn't populate them. So that's something to just double check that they're definitely not part of any club or have been in the past. So once we're in there, we'll just then pop in the phone name and the surname into the boxes and you just click continue. This is where you'll then see whether it's coming up with somebody who's assigned to a club. What you'll find is that it'll have the club name or the previous club name, and it'll have either terminated on one side or active. And that's where you would know if they're still a member of another club or not. Because it's a brand new member, what we're doing is just click in continue as a new member, and it'll bring up the details to be able to put in for the DMS. So this will only ask you some details. You do need to go back in again and add in, say the spouse details, we don't really put that in anymore, but anything extra that you would want to add in, it doesn't give you all the boxes there, it would have to just be done in the template database. So adding an existing Rotarian to your club, so is not a member of any club at the moment, but has been previously. It's the same process that we're going through. So it's still going into membership, still putting in your first name, surname, and then we're just clicking continue at that. And what we're looking for when the next screen comes up is the right club that they're assigned to. And that's where you would then look. I mean, at the moment, my one is showing that it's active. What you'll find is that one member terminated, and that's the one that we want to look at. And then we just click add membership. It will then come up with the same screen as you had before, which will allow you to put in any of the details that you need to put in, and then it'll allow you to select your club at the bottom and the date that they've been admitted into your club. So a pretty straightforward process to add them in. So new club goes in there and then the admission date there. Just remember that it does need to be written as a 4-figure date. A lot of the time that's something that you don't even think about. I mean, I just pop in 20 or 21 or whatever it may be, and it never ever works. And I always wonder why it doesn't work, but that's exactly why a lot of the time it needs to be a 4-digit year. and then you click transfer member, they'll go into your club. Now, changing a membership type, which is quite common around this time of the year if we're looking to have somebody who was maybe an active member that wants to change to honorary membership. So again, we're just going into your club list this time. So once you're in there, you're going to the My Area tab and into My Club this time, and then you're presented with that screen. So when you find a Rotarian on the list that requires the membership type, there is that little square on the right-hand side with the 2 arrows. So when you click that, it will then pop up with this screen. And it's like a little pop-up on the screen that you'll get. So what you want to do there is click the Change Membership tab, and then you will get a box that comes up that will give you the current membership type, the new membership type, which you would then select, and then the admission or change date of that person. And then you just click Update, and then that should then update. Terminating a Rotarian's membership, it's very much the same. As it says there, please don't terminate a membership of somebody who's going to another club. It does result, or it can result in a Rotarian losing their continuous service. It doesn't always, depend on how long you wait before they're admitted into a new club, but it is easier just for us to do the transfer. So again, you're just going the same way in. So into your club, find the person that you're looking for. And it's the exact same tab that we're looking for as well. So that little one with the arrows going in opposite directions. This time when that screen comes up, we are clicking the terminate member rather than change membership. And it's going to ask you for the date that they've to be terminated from and the terminating reasons. So the reasons are there on the left-hand side. There is a terminated joining new club one. As I said, I don't advise that you use it. I would advise that we just look at transferring them. But there are different things that you can log that under for their termination. So you put that in there for the termination reason, pop your termination date in, be aware of the year format again, and then just click confirm termination. And they, depending on what date you've put in there, should then remove from your club listings on the DMS. You're transferring a Rotarian to a new club. So a transfer of Rotarians between clubs should only be done by a member of the district team. Preferably myself or the district secretary. It'll obviously be Philip next year. It's generally just so we can make sure that there's no mistakes made. It's quite easy to transfer it to the wrong club, and it then causes problems for that club in respects to membership numbers and things like that. So we just ask that you contact one of us and we can do that transfer for you. Now, adding your club officers in for the next Rotary year. Just make sure that you've got either the RI numbers or the surnames noted down beforehand of the officers that were put in. That will help you massively. Where we're going this time is still under your My Area tab, but you're going into officers this time. Now, at the top, you will see the current year officers, and when you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see then the future officers for the following year. So when you're in there, we're clicking Add Role, and that will then bring up another tab which looks like this. Where I've got the RI number in there, you can either put the RI number in or you can put the surname in, doesn't matter what one, and then you just click Go. It will then come up with everybody under there that either has that surname or the person that has that RI number. And then you need to actually click that little, I don't even know what you would call it, it's almost like a pencil button, and it just selects that person. You then go into officer role, click whatever position it is that that person is taking that year, and all you need to do then is click the confirm button at the bottom. So just be aware that there are only certain things that you can add in on the DMS. So President, Secretary, Treasurer, Foundation Chair, Membership Chair and Executive Secretary are the only ones we could put in there. Senior Vice President and any other membership chairs, they need to be put in on the template site. There is no way to do it through the DMS. So once we've completed that, we're pushing it to the RI Global database, and then we just repeat those steps for any other officers that need to be added. Now, On the occasion that we need to change our club officers mid-year, which sometimes happens, again, make sure you've got the RI numbers or surnames beforehand. This time, for this example, it just uses that the current secretary has resigned from the club and we've now appointed a new Rotarian to that position. So we go into the officer part, we bring up the list and we find the secretary under the list of the current year officers. Now, the first step that we need to do is change that end date for that current secretary. So we click the pencil on the right hand side under edit, and that will then bring up this screen. And all we need to do there is change the current end date to the end date all we need to do is change that current end date in the bottom bit there to the new end date of that person. So if they were to terminate today, we would put in today's date. If they were maybe terminated at the end of the week from that position, we would put in that date. And then you would just push it to the RI Global database. And then what you'll find is that it will then come up and it will show you the new end date on that main screen, which will allow you to add in another person for this year. So it's the same way as you've done for the previous. We would just add role, find that person, and it will automatically bring up their start date as the date that we have stopped to the previous one. And it will automatically put the end date in as the end date of that current Rotary year. So changing the Rotarian's email address, which is probably one of the most common questions that I get. This is the only way that we are able to do it. So we have the ability to change a contact email address. We cannot change anything else. So your login email address, you have to do that yourself. Your secretary can't do it, your president can't do it. It's your email, you need to change it. So what we can do is change the one that any correspondence goes out to when we use the DNS lists. But when it comes to actually logging into the DNS, into My Rotary, into any other system that you're using that email address for, it will still always show that email address somewhere unless you change it. Now, in your own account, it does show up when you go into your own profile. It gives you a bit under your primary email address where it says to change login email address, click this link. And that's you won't have that unless it is your email address and your profile that you're going into. You won't have it for everybody. But that's the way that you would go in and you would change that directly. Otherwise, it is just a case of going to My Rotary and clicking on forgotten email or change email. And you'll be able to then go in and change that there, which should then allow you to log into all the systems with that different email address. If you change the contact email address for either yourself or for a Rotarian in your club, where we're going is back into your My Club lists. And what we're doing there is just clicking the edit button. And that's the exact process that you would take if you were changing any contact information for them. So it doesn't just have to be your email address. If they've moved house, that's where you would change it. If they changed phone number, again, that's where you would change it. So anything like that, it can all be changed through this little tab. So we're bringing the membership list up, we find that person and we click that edit button, and we will then be brought a screen that looks like this. So it'll automatically open on details, which is the one that will show their name, their address, their contact numbers, things like that. What we need is the tab next to it that's edit primary email. So once we're in there, it will show your login email and it will show you an RI Global email. So all that we need to do there is click the add a new email button. We will then get that screen up that comes to the right hand side. So we put the new email address in there. When we select type, we want to select primary. We want to select personal. And then we want to select primary for that part. So you click yes, and there is this primary email for contact. Once you then add and push that to the global database, it will update on the bottom of your main detail page. It will show that email address. What you might find though is that that login email address will still show at the previous one. So that's where it really comes in to if they need to change that at the same time, they will need to do that themselves. There's no way of us doing that for them. And that will then push that all through. So finding help on the DNS, As I said, these basic processes can be sent out in a PDF document as well. We can help you through anything that we need to help you through, and we've got contacts at RGBI as well if we need to contact them for any reason, or if there's anything out of our control. Sometimes things do get a little bit messy with things, and it is a case that we need to get them involved to get it sorted out for us, but it's possible. There's nothing that can't be sorted. You can find your own online help as well. So it's through the DMS itself, you can find it very easily. We just go to the online help section, and that will actually bring up this page on the RGBI website, and that will take you through. There's different things for handbooks, for creating your handbooks on there, your search and email, any FAQs about how you're working certain things. It will take you through basically anything that you could have an issue with, mostly. What it also will show you is the sync guides. So a lot of people still update the details on the template site. We can't do that, basically. If you add a member, terminate a member, change details, you're making it difficult for yourself. That's probably the straightest way to tell you, because it will not sync backwards. And then we've got to remember that all of the membership data and things like that all come from what is logged on the DMS. So by terminating somebody on the template site, it will not terminate them on the DMS. Therefore, when it comes down to the end of the year and you maybe get your New Year statement through for your membership charges, they'll still be on there. So just make sure that any changes that you're making to any Rotarians membership, it's all done through the DMS, just to keep yourself right and to keep us all up to date with the membership details, and make sure that we've got the right details for your club as well. Now that is the presentation there. I know that's quite quick to take all that in as to what you need to be doing and where you need to be doing it. Like I said, I can send this out to anybody that needs it. It did help a lot last year. I think that after this was sent out, I had not even half the amount of questions as I've had the previous year. So it's definitely worth getting a copy of if you find that you might need it for something that we've covered today. But at the moment, I'm happy to take any questions that anybody's got, if anybody's got any.
Oh, I think Philip's got a question.
I have a couple of questions actually. First is, we've had members over the years who've left, and the DMS now shows them as active non-member. Is that a grace period?
No, that's because they've been terminated in the wrong system.
Well, they were terminated in the DMS.
How long ago?
Some of them were within the last 12 months.
Okay.
And it's just a category that confused me, this idea of an active non-member. And I just wondered whether it was something to cover, let's say you terminated them by mistake and then actually they were going to join another club. And I wondered whether it was some internal grace system. But
I have found over the last few months, certainly not any further back than that, but I have had queries about that same thing. And there tends to be either one or two reasons. So it either has been terminated in the wrong system, therefore it's not linked to a club anymore, but they're still shown as active, or it's some kind of issue with the system. The last one I dealt with, it was actually an issue with the system and we had to get that all updated. It's something that if you get something like that, it needs to go to RGBI to sort. We don't have any control over sorting it. It won't allow us to add them into a club again. It won't allow us to terminate them again. Basically shows up when you try and do anything with them that the member cannot be found in RIBI. So it's something that needs to go a bit higher to be sorted.
yes, it'll be interesting to see when the 12 months roll over and see whether they disappear. If they still stay around and it's after July, I imagine that I may have to kind of get involved and deal with that. Anyway, that was one question. The second question was about the login email address. If somebody has changed their contact address in the DMS, but has still got their original login email address, and they use the forgot password capability, does it use their contact email address rather than the login one?
No.
So it still tries to use the login one.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody has actually lost access to that email address, what's the procedure for getting them to log in again?
RIBI.
RIBI. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything that is not straightforward like that, if they can't gain access, if you think about anything, if you can't gain access to your email address, you need to go a bit higher to get that sorted. There's not somebody that you could just send it on to that would be able to resolve that issue. Anything, those kind of problems, we don't have any control over, that we can't really get involved when it comes to email addresses. It's very, very difficult. So it needs to go higher. And what they do is basically remove the old one, put the new one on, and send them a password link so they can go in and update the password. That is not something that we're able to do.
I'm generally very impressed with the fact that the login email address is under the control of the user and not admins. That's very rare to see, but very reassuring. So, but it's interesting to know. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Christy, quite interesting. I was trying to help a club yesterday, and I came across just what Philip has mentioned, which was active non-member. I'd set it aside to have a word with you anyway, but that's the first time I've ever seen that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a known issue at the moment. I sent it on to Tom Adams the last time I had it, because I think it was Aberdeen St Nicholas that were having the issue, and he had sorted it straight away, managed to get it all updated, but I don't know why it's happening. Traditionally, when it happened before, it was because it had been terminated in my Rotary or the template site before it had been terminated in the DMS. And because it doesn't sync backwards, it's just going to remove the RIBI details rather than removing the membership completely. But for some reason, it does happen now and again from doing it through the DMS. So I honestly don't know if that's an issue at the moment or not, Kath, but it's worth contacting RGBI and they'll sort it.
Okay. I was just looking to see if there were any more questions. I've answered a few whilst you were speaking, but there aren't any other ones just now. So thank you very much, Christy, for coming on. And
Sorry, can I come in?
Yes, Gordon.
Gordon in Aberdeen.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
what these gentlemen touched on covers one of the queries I've had for a while. We have a couple of members, their details seem to be all right in DMS and RI, but they don't get any of the emails from RI or RIGBI. They get, I think they get the 1010 vision, and also there's a member which when she was talking about changing emails, we have a member whose old login address is there, is different from his user email, and he's one of the ones that doesn't get anything.
Right, okay. It's possibly worth sending that on so we can get that all updated then.
Okay. And maybe, I think the problem is they can't get back in themselves to change it. So
Yeah.
I think these issues all seem to be coming together.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, thanks, Gordon. Sorry, I hadn't noticed Jim Hall has got his hand up as well. Christy, I think with a question for you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I've got a member that's transferring to France. How does that handle that through the DMS?
So you send that on to me, we'll take it higher and get them transferred. You just need to know exactly what club they're going to and what date they're going on.
Okay. Do I need to terminate them first? No,
No.
You do that.
We don't terminate them at all. We do a transfer.
Right.
So it means that they keep their continuous service. And all we do is we would send it on to RGBI. They will probably need to take it to RI because it's out of that area completely, and we'll get it all transferred. But it means that they show that continuous service between your own club and the new club.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
I think that's everyone, Christy.
Yep.
Thank you very much for coming on and for giving that excellent presentation, which is most helpful. I think you're a busy person, Christy, not only with Rotary jobs, but all that you do. So we're very grateful to you. I guess you have to pop off again now.
I do, yes. If anybody needs me, just pop me an email and I'll get back to you when I can.
Yeah, that's great. Very many thanks, Christy.
No
we'll see you
problem.
something soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, we move on now to safeguarding or PVG, and DG Alistair is going to pick that up for us. Thank you, DG.
Thank you very much, Kath. I'm going to share my screen and do the best I can to make this interesting for 20 minutes or so. Here we go. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, good. So, yeah, as District Secretary Kath said, I'm going to very quickly go through some of the fundamentals of the PVG scheme and diversity, equity and inclusion.
Can you just get a banana or something?
Okay, so first thing here, and this is the one area, clubs are autonomous and we can pretty much do what we want to do within the boundaries of the Constitution. Compliance, unfortunately, is not an option. It's actually a legal requirement for clubs to follow the laws on compliance. So if we look first of all at PVG, these are the areas I'm going to cover today. Very briefly, the law over the policy documents, how the scheme works, who are vulnerable groups, what regulated work is, Rotary and teachers, reporting concerns, and then the new application system. So firstly, we are bound by the Protection of Vulnerable Groups Scotland Act of 2007, which was enacted in February 2011. The February 2011 date is important, or 2011 date is important. If you have anyone in your club who says that they already have a PVG or they have a disclosure, and you ask them for the date on it, if it's prior to November 2011, chances are it's an old disclosure that they have and it's no longer valid. They would have to reapply as if they'd never had one. So bear that in mind. It does happen reasonably often that people have these old disclosures from 10 years ago, and they're finished now. As far as Rotary is concerned, we are bound by the Rotary GB&I safeguarding policy, which is a 70-odd page document and really is written in terms of the English system. We also have the Rotary GB&I Scottish Amendment, which is probably the one that you want to be getting a hold of. It's about 20-odd pages. It's on the Rotary GB&I website, and I think it's still on the district website as well, under the compliance section. It certainly was, but I haven't checked before I came on. But the Scottish Policy Amendment is really the one that you want to download and have a read through. So how does the PVG scheme work? Well, there is what's known as effective barring. So when we make an application, that person's application is assessed, and they look at any, in 99.9% of the cases, the applications we're making are for people who have had no previous convictions or anything like that. But say, for instance, we make an application and someone has a driving conviction from 4 or 5 years ago, whether that be speeding or something like that. The PVG scheme look at that and assess it against the work that they are going to be asked to do. And if we are making an application for a Rotarian, for instance, to drive a minibus full of kids, and they've got a driving conviction from a few years ago, there's a chance that that may not go through. So they actually assess the vetting information and they say, is it relevant to the position that the person is going to be taken on? The second thing is the adults list. It used to be with the old disclosure system, a disclosure was a disclosure. Made no difference, children or protected adult. Now we have a separate list for the adults in Scotland. So you can have, it's 2 separate PVGs. You would have one for working with children, one for working with protected adults. The next thing about how the scheme works, which is probably the most important, is the continuous updating. So if you are join the PVG scheme and then later you have a conviction or something like that happens, that information, if it's relevant to what you're doing under the PVG scheme, if it's relevant to the job that you're doing under the PVG scheme, that information will be fed back to Rotary or to whatever organisation it is that you're registered on the scheme with, if it's relevant to the work that you're doing with them. So it allows a continuous updating of the system. And also, and this last one is a claim that they make, that it's a streamlined disclosure process. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think the new one that we're going to talk about, where we're doing it online now, is a bit more streamlined, but the old one was still fairly slow. So, who are vulnerable groups? These are the two areas of vulnerable groups. First one is children. Very simple, anyone under the age of 18. Protected adult is probably the more difficult of the two. And here's the legal definition here. It's defined as an individual aged 16 or over who is provided with and thus receives a type of care, support or welfare service. Protected adult is a service-based definition, and it avoids labelling adults on the basis of their having a specific condition or disability. So just because a person is disabled doesn't make them a protected adult. They have to be in receipt of care, support or a welfare service, and it's at that particular time. So as I sit here today, I am not a protected adult. On Monday morning, if I go to the dentist, as soon as I walk in the door of the dentist's, I am a protected adult. At that point, I'm receiving care, and therefore I become a protected adult. If you break your leg and go into hospital to get a plaster put on, at that point, while you're in the hospital, you're a protected adult. An elderly person in a care home, whilst they're in the care home, are under a care, support or welfare service, and therefore they are a protected adult whilst they're in the care home. If they are able to go out and go to the shops, as soon as they step out the front door, they're no longer a protected adult. It's a very controversial part of the scheme. We've had many arguments about it. Hopefully they will change it eventually, but that's the system as it stands at the moment. So, regulated work. First part is it's illegal for us as an organisation to offer regulated work to a person who's barred. And the follow-on from that is the only way that we can find out if a person is barred is to make an application to the PVG scheme. But it's illegal for us to offer regulated work to a barred person. Under the new regulations, it's now mandatory for people carrying out regulated roles with children and protected adults to be a member of the PVG scheme. So now it is illegal not only for us to offer work to a barred person, but it's also illegal for a person to carry out regulated work if they're not a member of the PVG scheme. And also the third part is that the lifetime element of the PVG scheme membership has ended. And that's just purely due to the number of people on the PVG scheme in Scotland now. I think it's something like 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 of the population are now registered on the PVG scheme. So what they're doing now is they're replacing it with a 5-year membership period. You won't have to reapply, but they will contact you after 5 years and ask if you still want to remain on the scheme and if you're still doing the regulated work that you were originally put on the scheme for. Back to regulated work again, and it doesn't apply to all jobs in volunteering, it only applies to regulated work. And there's 2 types of regulated work, with children and with protected adults. And these are usually jobs that include some element of caring, teaching, supervising, providing personal services, working directly with these people, and there has to be a degree of regularity to the activities above. Now, the degree of regularity is not defined in the law, and it's taken to mean that if it happens more than once, it has become a regular activity. So, unfortunately, there's no legal definition for that other than if it's happening more than once, it's classed as regular. And the current regulated roles we have in the district are youth counsellor or youth mentor at Ryla, anyone involved with Rota Kids, anyone involved with Interact, various things within Youth Exchange, young carers and riding for the disabled. These are the current list of the regulated roles that we have registered. There's one more I think that Kath's working on at the moment for a new activity that's going ahead. If you have an activity in your club that you think may fall into the category of regulated work, please get in touch. We may have to add it to this list. So how do we decide on what is regulated work? Well, there's a 5-stage assessment process. Is it work? Now, most things that we do as Rotarians, which will involve children or will involve protected adults, will be classed as work. So I would say we don't need to think about that one. Majority of things we do, if it's on a regular basis, will be classed as work. The next stage in the assessment is, who are you working with? Is it one of the protected groups? Is it children or is it protected adults? The third part is, what are you doing with that group? Is there an element of teaching, training, supervising, caring involved? Is it your normal duties? And that's down to the regularity of things. Does it happen more than once? And the fifth part is, are there any exceptions which apply? This is known as the incidental rule. The best example would be if, for example, your club decided to run yoga classes. You had someone in your club who was a yoga expert and you wanted to run yoga classes, and it just so happened that there was a couple of under 18s came along to the yoga classes. They are incidental to the whole thing. The majority of the people there will be adults. It's not a class that's specifically for children. Therefore, that would be an incidental, and that would be an exception to the rule of needing a PVG scheme membership. So that's how we assess what the work is. Rotarian teachers, and this is one that has come up time and time again. I'm a teacher in the school where the Interact and Rota Kids are taking place. Do I still need to add Rotary to my PVG scheme membership? Simple answer is yes. If you're there as a Rotarian, then you need to hold a scheme membership for Rotary. I know you'll have one as a teacher for the school, but you also need one for Rotary as well. If you're only there attending as part of your duties as a teacher at the school and you're not there as a Rotarian, it's not necessary. It's important because of the continuous assessment that I spoke about earlier. And if that person who is there as a teacher and also as a Rotarian doesn't register through Rotary, then Rotary never get to find out if that person ever has any additions made to their PVG scheme membership or if they're barred from becoming a member. So, reporting concerns. Now, this is an area that an awful lot of people find uncomfortable, and it sometimes does get avoided. But there are written guidelines for Rotary which clubs and individuals have to follow if they have any concerns about a protected person. Now, I would ask you all to make yourself familiar with this. The details can be found on the Rotary GBNI website under the compliance section for safeguarding. And there are there's forms and signs of abuse, dealing with complaints, and a referral form. Now, your first point of contact, if you think there is something going wrong, your first point of contact must always be the police or social work. But we also have to fill in a form to cover ourselves for that as well. But please make yourself familiar with these. If you want to download them, you can do that. They're not huge documents, but they are important that you recognise the forms and signs of abuse and that you're able to deal properly with complaints when they arrive. And best practice, even when an activity is not regular work, we should always be thinking about best practice. So if we're working with young people or with vulnerable protected adults, please ensure that there's more than one of you present during activities. Always try and have someone with you, or at least be in sight or hearing of other people. There should be, any manual support should be discouraged. It really is best if there's no contact. But if there is, it's important that you gain consent first of all, explain to the young person or the protected adult what it is you're going to do, because it can be misinterpreted not only by the person themselves, but by other people who view it. And finally, treat all the young people and protected adults with respect and show a good example. Remember, if nothing else, it's Rotary's reputation that you're dealing with here as well. And the new application system, and this is probably the part you're probably most interested in, the new applications are now made online. They're made online by myself as the District Protection Officer. And for me to do that, you would need to contact me and let me know that you have people within your club who want to join the PVG scheme or who need Rotary added to an existing PVG scheme membership. I'll send you back a very brief one-page form for you to complete, just asking for the person's title, their full name, date of birth, email address and home address. The important thing there is to make sure that the email address is absolutely accurate. Without that, that's going to be a problem. It's also going to ask which regulated role they're going to be taking part in. All I need to know there is it Rota Kids, is it Interact, is it Ryla Mentor, whatever it's going to be. But let me know what the regulated role is. I then need to know if they're already a scheme member, and if so, for which category. So if you have someone, for instance, in your club who is already a member of the PVG scheme for the Scouts, you would put there, yes, they're already a scheme member, for which category? Children. And then it will ask you to have a sight of 3 forms of ID, one of which must include their address details. Preferably one should be photographic, but I don't need to see photocopies of these. I just need you to verify what you've seen and that you have certainly seen it. I will then take these details and email them to Volunteer Scotland Disclosure Services. The rest of the conversation then, the rest of the application then, is done between Volunteer Scotland and the applicant themselves. At no point do I or the club have to get involved at any point from there on. And one important thing at the bottom there, it's illegal to apply for a scheme membership if it's not required. I've had a number of instances in the past where people have said, I'd like, I've got an incoming president this year who'd like to apply for PVG scheme membership. I say, what exactly are they doing? Oh, nothing, it's just in case. Just in case is not a reason for becoming a member of the PVG scheme. It's actually illegal to make an application without having a regulated role. So I will skip the questions at this point. I'm going to go on and do diversity, equity, inclusion, which is only a few slides, and then if it's okay with Kath, if we have time, we'll take a few questions at the end. So diversity, equity and inclusion, again, we're going to cover these parts, what are the legal requirements, different types of discrimination, what else we should be aware of, dignity and respect, and best practice again. Legal requirements, these 9 areas are what are known as protected characteristics. These are protected in law, and we are not allowed to discriminate against anyone because of any of these. So I'm not going to read them out, they're there for you. If you put in protected characteristics into Google, it will give you this list time and time again. The different types of discrimination that we have to be aware of. Well, there's direct discrimination, and which is fairly obviously, it's just treating someone less favourably because of a protected characteristic. There's indirect discrimination, and that's putting things in place that someone with a protected characteristic would find puts them at an unfair disadvantage. For instance, if you have someone in your club who possibly is disabled in a wheelchair, and you decide to have your club meetings 2 floors up in a hotel and there's no lift, then that could be seen as indirect discrimination against that person. There's also harassment and victimisation. If you want legal definitions of these, they're available online, but really it's just nasty behaviour, and unfortunately it does go on. things we should be aware of. Well, these are not legally protected characteristics, but I think we should also be aware of some of these other things, that there's socio-economic factors around Rotary membership, and that's more to do with making the Rotary experience affordable to everyone, having the possibility of events that are priced at such a level that some members may not be able to take part. There's also positive discrimination, which I don't encourage. I've seen it happen in a few instances, and discrimination for a legitimate aim. Now, an example of discrimination for a legitimate aim is, for instance, this is where discrimination is actually, it's legal, it's allowed if you have a legitimate aim. An example being if a hospital advertises for a surgeon and they say that that surgeon should have 10 years experience, and that someone comes along and says that they can't meet the requirement because they've taken time off work to care for young children, and it looks like that would be indirect discrimination because of sex. But the hospital can't justify it because to have that job done properly does require the full 10 years of experience. So that would likely be classed as a legitimate aim. The Dignity and Respect Policy, again, is on the Rotary Great Britain Ireland website, but it covers dignity, unacceptable behaviour, harassment, bullying, victimisation. It also covers what the responsibilities of the club officers are. And this gets back to things like internal disputes, which are often down to one of these parts: dignity, unacceptable behaviour, harassment, etc. I think every dispute I've had to deal with in the last few years has involved one of these things. Methods of resolution, again, as Kath spoke about, there's a very good document on the website that explains a bit about that. And also confidentiality and what you can share with people and what you can't. And finally, why Rotary needs to address this issue. It is actually, in the last couple of years, has been one of the largest single areas of claim against Rotary insurance, has been for breaches of the Dignity and Respect Policy, which is quite a worrying thing. Best practice in clubs. I think every club should have a diversity officer, or at least make someone responsible for monitoring what goes on within the club. I think it's very important that you challenge unacceptable behaviour immediately. I know I've spoken to a couple of people who have said such and such happened in my club, and I really should have said something at the time, but I didn't do it. But yeah, you should say something at the time. I know it's going to be difficult, but unless we start to challenge unacceptable behaviours in our clubs, then we're going to stay rooted in the past. We have to move on. I think it's important that we give guidance to guest speakers before attending a meeting. I've been at a few meetings where the guest speaker has come on, especially things like Burns suppers and the like, and some of the things that are said are quite frankly unacceptable. And it's not just banter, it's unacceptable behaviour. I would ask clubs to do an accessibility audit and look at your venue and your practices, things like hearing loops and accessibility to the meeting room, and change if that's required. But probably most important is not to be frightened to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. There's also a short video that's available for clubs as well if they want it, that they can show at a club meeting, and just get agreement from members that you will follow the diversity, equity and inclusion policy. After all, if you sign the compliance document, you're agreeing to that already. But so many times I think it's signed without really understanding what it is you're signing. And finally, always consider our brand. If there are people from outside Rotary there, it's all about the impression that we give, and sometimes that's not the best one. So, happy now to take any questions.
I know, Philip, you've got your hand up, but can you just hold off for a moment, because Michelle put in a question to do with PVG. Michelle, do you want to just say this to Alistair now, the question that you wrote in the chat?
Yeah, it was just something I wanted to check, Alistair. When we've got a list of obviously who within Rotary and Rotaract hold PVGs for Rotary and Rotaract, some of those are no longer in our club. Do we need to notify anybody that these members are no longer in our club?
Yeah, you should really just give their name to me, and I'll contact disclosure volunteer services and get them to take them off the list.
Perfect. I'll send you an email later in that case.
Okay, thanks, Michelle.
Philip, do you want to go ahead with your question?
I've got two questions, one on PVGs. So I'm registered on the scheme from sports related because I do supervision and teaching of both child and adult protected adult groups, and the fees are paid by Scottish Curling for that. So if I was to work with Interact or Rota Kids and I need to be added to the scheme, who pays for that amendment?
There is no charge for it because we're a volunteer service. We do it through Volunteer Services Disclosure Scotland, and that way there's no charge to us for it, Philip.
Okay, that's good. The second one is on the diversity and equality inclusion. And I was thinking about indirect discrimination. I don't know whether it happens, but let's say a club puts in a rule to ensure, or with the best intention, to ensure gender balance in the club officers. So let's say you had the posts of president, vice president and junior vice president, and they're elected posts, and they introduced a rule that said you can't have more than two of the same gender in that. Is that indirect discrimination?
Possibly. It's possible. It could possibly be looked at as positive discrimination. I haven't heard of it happening anywhere else, Phil.
Well, it happens to be happening in Scottish Curling this year, and it's all for the right reasons. But in any particular year, you could have the best possible candidate. Let's say you've got a male president and vice president, and a female wants to be or is voted to be the junior vice president. Eliminating them on the grounds of gender or sex seems definitely to be discriminatory in my head.
Yeah, I mean, it would be for me as well, and I'm a great believer in it's the best person for the job who should get the job. It's just unfortunate that possibly in some, and I can only speak from a Rotary point of view, that there are some clubs and some misogynists within clubs who would possibly look to exclude a female member from those positions. It's not something that I've been made aware of, and it would certainly be up to that particular member to make a case for that happening. But I wouldn't be keen to see that being put in as a rule in a club.
No, I agree with you, and I value your opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think Jennifer, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, but volunteering at care homes for the elderly, which used to happen pre-COVID and may come back again. When we go more than once, where we go say once a week for 6 weeks, a group of us to help out with a craft session or a music and dance session, which is under someone else's supervision, and care workers from the home are always there. Do we need PVG for that?
My initial thought would be no.
That was ours, but it's just this. If regularity is more than once.
Yeah, I mean, I'd happily take advice. I'd happily phone Disclosure Scotland and get their advice on that. But when I've spoken to them about similar things in the past, it has always come back saying no if there are staff there who are PVG scheme members already. It wouldn't be necessary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Helen from Arbroath, you had a question? Thank you.
We're about to start a Rota Kids Club in one of the schools, and the school would like us PVG'd through the local council system.
You would still need to be PVG'd through Rotary.
As well, yeah,
yes.
That's fine, yeah.
Thank you. Jim, you've got your hand up, but I think that was from before. Can you just clarify if you want to ask a question, Jim Hall? And you're muted.
No, I'll take my hand down. Sorry, that's from last time.
That's all right. I didn't want to exclude you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Alistair. That was excellent on both subjects. I think particularly on safeguarding, that's very helpful to know what is actually happening and the new scheme of things online, or the new applications online. So thank you very much. We're just coming towards the end of this morning. Stuart, you've got your hand up. Have you a question for us?
Yes, it's to do with the officers who may be looking after Dignity, PVG and GDPR, who may not be covered by the council. I presume council are responsible for what goes on within these areas.
I've always been led to believe, Stuart, that it's the secretary who holds the ultimate responsibility for these things within the club.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Stuart. Thanks,
Yeah.
Alistair. Okay, we're just coming towards the end of this morning. I'd just like to say a few words on health and safety. Again, there's a lot on this in the Rotary GBI website, and in particular, those of you who are directly involved will have seen that there is a risk assessment document there, which not only is the document there, but it has an accompanying document that tells you how to undertake the risk assessment, which is very helpful and useful. At the current time, in light of COVID, any risk assessments carried out should also take into account COVID issues. And on the document, that is actually highlighted. And the other thing to remind you about in health and safety is, first of all, the importance of it, not only from the point of view of insurance, because insurance cover would only be there if we carry out risk assessments, and when we do carry out risk assessments, but because of, Alistair mentioned a moment ago, the brand of Rotary and the responsibility of Rotary, we would never want to be putting people in a position where they were not safe. I think it's as simple as that. Often we say it's about insurance, but it's about everybody's safety and ensuring that we're in a safe environment. When we return to meetings in person, and like the rest of you, I have no idea when that is, because it's really in the hands of the First Minister and her instructions and the Scottish Government. But one of the things we should do at that point is to risk assess the venue where we have meetings. And of course, for any events, as I said, we risk assess in light of COVID. So again, important. And I think, you know, just a little anecdote, because sometimes we forget what's going on, but in the rain, because the rain from Alistair's neck of the woods that some of us were speaking about earlier on today has moved west and is now over Dalgety Bay, so there's a bit of rain here. And out in the streets of Dalgety Bay just now is a chap from our Rotary Club who is walking to raise funds for the Trussell Trust. He has walked, I think, 1.5 million steps, which is something to be admired. And this is the final walk this morning, the final push. And yesterday, someone was about to put up on Facebook. What we do in our club for Facebook notices is that we all check each other's Facebook so that we find the typos and so on and so forth. And particularly to do with health and safety, the person who prepared it, and I could understand why, he said, if you see Andy out and about, you know, please cheer him, please encourage him, and please think about walking with him. And I had to write back and say to her, well, actually, we haven't risk assessed that. We don't have in place, see Helen's nodding her head, we don't have in place a Walking with Andy risk assessment. So we either need to do it fairly quickly or take it out. So the point I'm making is that something that sounds quite simple sometimes can be quite complex. So we just need to make sure that these things are in place. And I think that's what the talk has been about today, is ensuring that a number of things are in place and that we follow the instructions. And as on some issues, as DG Alistair said earlier on, we don't have the choice. We have to comply with legislation and so on. So I don't know if there are any final questions. If people want to put up their hands, we can answer them. Just looking to see if any hands are shooting up. I think Roy from Cooper I can see, and he's waving his hand. So Roy, have you got, yeah, he's unmuting, so he's got a question.
Just been checking Cooper's DMS entry. There's one member that's on there twice, so somehow he's got mixed up. He's on there synced with the global database, but he's got the incorrect ID number, and then he's on there again unsynced, but he's got the correct. Is that something we contact you about?
Yeah, leave that one with me. I'll be able to see that.
Okay, I'll send you an email.
Yeah. Well, actually, you don't need to, Roy. I can probably see the person. And
Dermot Stewart.
Oh well, okay. But if I get stuck, I'll come back to you.
Okay.
Bear with me, because I think this is one where I may have to go to Rotary GBNI, so it'll be Monday before we get them. Thank you, Roy. Anybody else?
Yeah. Duncan.
I can see Amanda and Linda with their hands up.
Yeah, Duncan.
Yeah,
Duncan. When are we looking to group meetings face to face again? Or what's the current thoughts on that?
There was a DG Alistair. I sent out a note on behalf of DG Alistair earlier this week, maybe Tuesday. Have you seen that, Duncan?
No, I haven't seen
No.
it.
Which club are you again, Duncan?
Leaving Rotary Club.
Right. This is the second, well, it's more than the second time I've been asked about this letter, and I just wonder if it's gone to everybody. Can other people recall seeing this? Yes, some can. Okay, Duncan, I'll make sure that you see that. The basis of it is, just for anybody else who hasn't seen it, is that at the present moment, that the legislation prevents us from meeting in a hospitality environment. So the hospitality rules that pertain to anybody else, or I should say us when we're not Rotarians, pertains to a group. Pertains to a Rotary group as well. So we would need to be, even if we go to level 0, the numbers that can meet together are quite restricted. So we need to be completely out of restrictions. And I don't think any of us know when that will be.
Surely if weddings can have 50 people and funerals can have 100 people, and it makes a nonsense of 10 Rotarians getting together, surely.
That may well be the case, Duncan, but all I can do is guide you to the law at the present moment. I think we might have a personal view, and if I was First Minister, I probably wouldn't do that. But then I haven't been elected First Minister, though I keep trying, because they don't want one that doesn't have a political party. I think it's very frustrating for us all, because we miss seeing our people, our friends, our long-standing associates and so on. Let's hope that something happens fairly quickly. But you're right, it's sometimes quite difficult to say, or sometimes quite difficult to see, I should say, people meeting in a particular group and not being able to meet in another one. But let's remember the Rotary brand. The Rotary brand is that, we keep to the rules and we get on with things. So we're very, I think DG Alistair would agree that he and I probably were not people who knew very much about COVID regulations once upon a time, but we could spend another 2 hours reciting them to you, because we spend so much time looking at them. So we're doing our best. Thank you very much. And anybody else want to? I can't see. Oh, there's hands up. Helen, is that your hand up again, or is that from last time? That's not that. James from Culloden, is that you with your hand up? If you unmute, we can hear you.
We've got a long-term project on the go. How often should we be reviewing the risk assessment?
But when you say long-term, are you talking years and so on, or?
Yes.
Yes.
The project we're doing, which we estimate that we will be involved in for another 2 years at least. Obviously, there was a risk assessment done early in the project, but how often should we review the risk assessment? And also, is there a need for a risk assessment to be displayed in any way?
No, well, I'll take the second one first, and the answer to that is no, you don't need to display it, but you should have it signed by the person who conducts the risk assessment and the president, and you should, I was going to say file it, but you should keep it available while it's in progress. As to how frequently, there is no frequency set out in any of the Rotary GB&I information. I would say that something like that, which is going on for a reasonable while, you should review regularly. So, for example, if this is still ongoing and hasn't been reviewed on the grounds of COVID and how that might be affected, perhaps now would be a time to do it. Otherwise, I can only say from experience or from my judgment that I would probably be doing something like that at least annually, if not 6 monthly. But certainly if anything actually changes in the actual project. So that, for example, my own club has a clothing bank and everything was risk assessed, but we've had to review it recently because although everything is still working in the same way, the location of the storage has changed. So it has to be risk assessed again. I think there's a good degree of common sense. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Philip wants to draw this to a conclusion.
Well,
no, he doesn't, because Gordon's got his hand up. I'll take Philip first, Gordon. I'll not lose you. Don't worry.
I was really going right back to the beginning, actually. I noted a question down really on the basic secretary role and club records. Is there anywhere at district or RBI level provided document store similar to Google Drive or OneDrive? I'm thinking of things like global grants, which have quite stringent requirements on keeping records for the club. That could go over several years, and succession planning. And I know in our club over the years, we've had trouble keeping access to records from global grants that were started years ago and maybe residing on individuals' PCs or tablets. And I just wondered whether there was anything provided at district level or RBI level at the moment to help with that. I know there are plans in the future to provide that, but is there anything at the moment?
I'm not aware of anything at the moment, Philip. I don't know. Alistair's shaking his head. The only thing I would say is that on global grants, for example, so much now is recorded online that probably that could be accessed relatively easily, but it's actually held in Rotary International. Because at one point, everything in global grants was on a written piece of paper or a printed piece of paper, but I'm not aware of any storage facilities. And I think if you're aware of something happening, because of things you're involved in, you're a step ahead of us.
Okay, that certainly has been mentioned for DMS2 if and when that may happen, but many global grants, like in our club, we had other grants associated with that, so we have to keep our own records anyway.
Yes.
And it's really difficult to keep track of that over the years as the offices change, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Gordon, sorry.
2 points. I'll just pick up on the last gentleman's point. In some of the previous training sessions on this sort of thing at Tawdry, the chap who used to be district governor who comes from up Inverness way, he mentioned that some of the Inverness clubs had come together or set up a storage facility for documents. That was 2-3 years ago.
Thank you, Gordon. I'm not aware of it, but I'll have a little chat around with people.
Yeah. The other thing is on the risk assessments in the legislation need to be reviewed annually. But that review can just be reading through it, looking at it, and just
putting it in it, yeah.
Yes, signing it off. So if you do a risk assessment, you should have a review date on it. And you, as you quite rightly say, if there's anything in the interim period that changes, either like location or equipment, or say as your chap walking along the road and you're wanting people to accompany him, then you have to do a new one.
That's really helpful, Gordon. Thank you very much. Thank you. Anybody else like to ask a question? I'm not seeing any hands, or I don't know if Michelle's waving at me or just wanting a question. I think she's waving. Okay, thank you very much. I'm conscious of the time. It's just coming up to 5 to 12. We'll get copies of handouts and PowerPoints and everything to you if you just give us a little time to get organised. Thank you very much for coming along. It's great to see people. We've had there's 30 people on just now, but I think it was up at 33 at one point. As I said earlier on, don't hesitate to get in touch with us if there's anything that you want to chat over, and we're certainly happy to do that, because that's our role here, is to provide support to everybody. And if we don't know the answer or can't take the action, as we can't, as Christy says, sometimes on DMS, we will get somebody to do that. Helen's dog has now turned up, but she's a little late for the meeting. My cat has been here the whole time, but she left a few moments ago. Those of you who know me and know when I'm on that Florence frequently comes to meetings, and indeed she was here earlier on. But thank you very much. I hope the rain has now passed over here. I hope you all have a pleasant afternoon. Thank you to Alistair and Christy in her absence for everything helpful, and thank you as well for helpful questions and giving us some advice as well. We're grateful, and I look forward to seeing you. I'll just put in a quick advert for the district handover a week tomorrow. If you respond to me quickly, like Michelle and Ian Dow did, I'll give you good seats at the handover. Have a think about that. Okay, see you again soon, and thank you very much for coming along. Bye just now.